Kirsten, you'll appreciate I'm drinking out of my Maryland cup today.
Marylander.
Reppin'.
We're like absolutely psychotic for
It's a cult, everyone.
Yep.
We have the best flag.
Yep.
No doubt about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just kick us off. We have a lot of ground to cover. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kirsten Green. I'm the Executive Director of the Retired Racehorse Project, and welcome to the third session of Aftercare Industry Month, which is a month-long webinar series on all kinds of topics relevant to the aftercare industry, whether you are an individual, for-profit, nonprofit. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about those that might be in a little bit of that limbo space. You might have a passion for aftercare and you've thought about going nonprofit and you're just trying to get some information, or you just recently founded a nonprofit and you're kind of in your baby years. I want to thank Thoroughbred Education and Research Foundation for the grant that made this possible. And just a little bit of quick housekeeping. This is a Zoom webinar, so you'll only be able to see myself and Lili. I will actually be hopping off of camera and just kind of helping with the moderation because Lili's got a lot of great content in her PowerPoint presentation. So I am not necessarily needed for much, but I will be here if anybody needs any assistance. And go ahead, and with us this evening is Lili Leonard, and I'm really excited that Lili could join us because I actually had the privilege of taking a local nonprofit fundraising and sustainability cohort that Lili led last fall, and she's just incredibly passionate and energetic, and that will come through right away. I'm sure you guys will notice. So for this evening, if you have any questions, we have scheduled in 4 breakpoints for questions. So I'll be monitoring them. If we don't stop and answer them right away, don't worry. We've kind of plotted out that we're going to take questions. And then at the very end, we're going to try to stay within the hour, but we will hang out as long as necessary to make sure everybody gets their questions covered. So with that, take it away, Lili.
Thank you, Kirsten. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you remotely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to ask Kirsten to enable participant screen sharing.
You should be good now.
Thank you very much. Y'all, no matter how many times we test something out, it just happens that way. Okay. As Kirsten mentioned, we've got a ton of content to cover. So what I will ask, and thank you again, Kirsten, for moderating the Q&A section. If you got a question, feel free to pop it in there. We're going to talk about what the sort of breaks are and what the 4 different sections are in just a moment. But as Kirsten mentioned, we're going to aim for about 15 minutes for each content area and then 5 minutes of Q&A. But first, I wanted to just quickly tell you that I'm one of you. I am an equestrian enthusiast. My wife is an avid equestrian. She could ride horses before she could walk. I am not quite as passionate about the riding element, but you can see we do love our horses. And so when Kirsten asked me to participate in this Retired Racehorse Project webinar, I was absolutely thrilled and honored. And I also want to tell you that the black dog from my company name is real. That's Ruby. She's my best friend. You're going to see her in a couple of the slides tonight because life's too short to be boring and because she's the best. So, I have my own small consulting firm. I really focus on organizations in Maryland. Born and raised in Maryland. There's a huge equestrian industry in Maryland, but I really think that the stuff we're going to talk about applies to you no matter where you are. And so I'm really thrilled to be here. So this is what we're talking about tonight: from passion to prosperity, founding and funding your nonprofit. Do you have to be somebody that doesn't have a nonprofit yet? Absolutely not. What I like to do is build out my content so that it's kind of choose your own adventure. Somebody is going to get something out of this. Everyone's going to get something out of this no matter what. Whether you're just looking to start a nonprofit and you're not really sure where to start, or whether you're a brand new nonprofit, or maybe you're a little bit more established but looking for some alternative things, or looking to really fill out your operations. There will be something in this presentation for you tonight. So let's talk briefly about what we're gonna discuss tonight. 4 sections, 15 minutes apiece, 5 minutes in between, and then we'll have a longer Q&A session at the end. So the first section, we're going to go over just an overview of charitable giving in the U.S. today. And key considerations before starting your nonprofit. So what are the questions we want to be asking ourselves in order to make sure that this is the right fit for us and this is the right time to do it? Then we'll get into, what most people think to be the unsexy stuff. I find the IRS very sexy, but most people find it kind of boring. But we're going to talk about IRS compliance and registration. And then we're also going to take a few minutes to talk about building that strong organizational foundation, specifically around your board, your policies and procedures, and your mission, vision, and your values. The third section is, all right, let's raise some money. Let's do this thing. Understanding and finding sources of financial support. We're going to talk about all of the different ways that people can engage with a nonprofit. We're really going to focus tonight on individual giving and grants because that's where the majority of funding comes from. But we will provide you with a list of sort of, what's the full menu of how people can engage philanthropically with a nonprofit. And then finding that startup funding, finding your first donors. A lot of folks are really worried and nervous about, well, how do I do this? So we'll give you some tools for that toolbox. And finally, how do we manage it all? What about the operations of all of this? And I'm going to say this a lot, but a nonprofit organization is actually classified as a business. It's a corporation. So you got to think about, the business side of things, knowing that a nonprofit does have tax exempt status, though. So we're going to talk about that, but really be thinking about operating your nonprofit sort of from the business perspective. We'll give you some tools for that. So, quiz time. How many nonprofit organizations are there in the U.S.? I don't know if if we're able to see that in the chat, but take a guess. Take a guess. Pop it in the chat. How many nonprofits do you think there are in the U.S.? Any guesses? Well, I will show you that I think you'll be surprised by the number. As of 2023, there are 1.94 million nonprofits in the US. Someone just said chat is disabled. That might be why. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I will work on that.
Thank you.
You can.
Hattie said, thanks, Hattie. Shout out. Well, sorry, if someone was going to guess 1.9 million, you would have won a lollipop. So there's 1.9 million registered nonprofit organizations in the United States. And here's kind of the breakdown of them. So the vast majority, and I think a lot of folks are going to be talking, if you're interested in starting an organization, most likely you're going to be a 501c3. So a lot of us think about, when we think about nonprofit, we think about C3. There's some other C 501c designations, C5s being labor unions, advocacy and welfare groups, membership organizations. All of these encompass the 1.94, but the vast majority, as you can see, just under 1.6 million are 501c3 organizations. I thought this was actually a really neat resource. This is hot off the press from candid.org, and this shows kind of a heat map of how many nonprofits exist in a state for every 10,000 residents. So take a minute and take a look, and wherever you're from, and once the chat's enabled, drop us a line and tell us where you're from and what the organization you represent or are looking to represent. You can kind of see where the breakdown is. I find that really, really interesting, but there are a lot of nonprofits out there. So let's think about this. We have 1.93 million registered nonprofits in the US, and you're thinking about being an added one, right? You're thinking about adding one to the pile. Here's what I want you to ask yourself. What's my mission? Okay. What is my mission and why does it matter? Everyone who wants to either start a nonprofit or is part of a nonprofit is a good person and wants to do something great. So you already know that you want to make a difference or you wouldn't be on this call. But I really want you to think specifically, what does that look like in terms of a mission and why is it important? The second question I want you to ask yourself is there another organization in my area that's already doing this work? So is there an unmet need that I can address? If the answer is yes, there's already an organization in your area doing this work, you might want to consider either partnering with them before starting your own nonprofit or adjusting your proposed mission and scope of work so that you're not in competition with them. The last thing we want to do is create redundancy or duplication in our own community, because then you're going to be fighting over the same resources. So these are why these questions are important to ask. The third question I want you to ask is, are there organizations outside of my area? So I'm in Maryland. Let's say I want to start an organization that's in Maryland, and I am looking for a great example of an organization that does it maybe in Texas or anywhere else. And that's fantastic. That gives me a great blueprint to start. So do some research and figure out, okay, well, here's what I want to do. Here's the difference in the world that I want to make, maybe in the equestrian industry, or it could be something else. And find peers across the country that are doing that. Just make sure that they're not too close so that you're competing against each other. And then, as I mentioned before, if there already is an organization in your area that's doing it, are there some alternatives rather than starting another 501c3? And you'll soon see that it's not for the faint of heart. It's not super challenging once you know what the steps are, but there's work involved in creating a nonprofit. So are there other alternatives? Fiscal sponsorship is actually a really neat mechanism that a lot of folks use when they want to pair up with an existing 501c3, and they can effectively be an extension of that C3, and that 501c3 takes on all of the reporting and accounting and financial responsibilities. So if you have any program collaborations, or if you say, you know what, I'm maybe not really ready to delve all the way into the nonprofit space, but I sort of want to give it a shot, consider finding sort of a peer organization or an aspirational nonprofit in your area and taking the temperature and see if it's worth engaging with them, or maybe engaging in a fiscal sponsorship with them. So, any questions on just the overview of charitable giving or key considerations before starting your nonprofit? Probably no questions yet, so we can kind of dig into the rest of the stuff. But I'll just give anyone a second to ask a question, and then we can move on. Okay.
Haven't stumped anybody yet. So
all right. Well, I'll try harder. Okay. Congratulations. We've gone through the stress test. We've questioned ourselves. Yes, no one's doing what I'm already doing. Yes, I've got my mission. I'm not duplicating efforts. Fantastic. You may pass go. You may collect $200. What do you do now? Here's the list. You're going to define your mission and your purpose. You're going to form a board of directors. You're going to incorporate as a nonprofit in your state. Remember, incorporated, corporation. A nonprofit organization is a corporation. They're just a tax-exempt corporation. You're going to establish bylaws and policies. You're going to secure an EIN, an employee identification number, from the IRS. Then you're going to file for that tax exemption. That 501c3 tax exempt status is what you're going to file for with the IRS. This may apply to you and it may not. Your mileage may vary depending on your state. You will apply for state tax exemptions, and I'll tell you where to look for your state to find that information depending on where you are. You may also have to register for charitable solicitation, which we'll talk about. And you got to make sure you stay compliant. So let's walk through every single one of those things so you feel confident. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define our mission and purpose, okay? You want to make sure that your purpose aligns with an IRS recognized charitable purpose. Rest assured, you will find a charitable purpose that your organization will be in alignment with. The big buckets are education, religion, scientific research, or public benefit. Most people are in the education space, some are in the public benefit space. And then you're also going to want to draft a mission statement. Well, why are we doing that now? Because when you incorporate your business in your state and when you file for tax exemption, you actually have to state your mission on your IRS paperwork. So you want to think about what that mission statement is. And we're going to talk a little bit later about messaging and why our mission is so important. It's not just for the IRS. Your mission informs everything that you do, and more importantly, everything you don't do. So take the extra time and really, really think about the language and who are you and what do you want to accomplish. And we'll talk about what goes into a mission statement in just a few minutes. So the second thing is you've got to form a board of directors. A board of directors is the governing body for nonprofit organizations. So an executive director of a nonprofit organization reports to a board of directors. They are the fiduciaries of the organization. And we'll talk about what that word means and the implications of that. But at a minimum, you need to select 3 board members who are unrelated to each other, which is the recommended minimum for the IRS. I always prefer to have a few more, but at minimum, you're going to want 3. Why do we need to do that now? Because when you're filing your paperwork with the IRS, you're also going to be listing those founding board members with their contact information. And the IRS wants to know that information as well. This does not mean that you can't transition board members off and add new board members. That is very common and should be happening. But just make sure that your founding board members are in compliance. So you want to make sure that there's at least 3. And these are an important group of people because they're going to be helping you create a lot of these founding documents and procedures that are going to really lay the groundwork for a successful organization. To that end, you want to develop roles and responsibilities. What's their job and what's not their job? And you also want to establish some governance practices, including a conflict of interest policy. And we just want to make sure, and the IRS wants to make sure, and I know your state office wants to make sure as well, that you don't have board members who are financially benefiting from the establishment of a nonprofit organization. So that's really what they're on the lookout for. Kirsten has already shared this PowerPoint with you, and we'll also circulate it around, I'm sure. Everything in this PowerPoint is linked. So if you have any questions or need templates on roles or responsibilities or anything like that, I've got a ton of resources in this PowerPoint, so they'll be really easy for you to access. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to incorporate as a nonprofit. First thing you want to do is pick a name. Pick a name that no one else has. Depending on your state, you can find this in different areas. Usually it's under business entities or something like that. Sometimes it's under commerce, sometimes it's under the Secretary of State. It just really depends on your state. But you got to make sure that your name isn't taken already, or they won't allow you to take that. You can also use the tax exempt search tool on the IRS, which you can see linked there. You're going to file your initial articles of incorporation. Again, we have templates for that. And you're going to designate a registered agent. So I wanted to show you kind of what that looks like, because this is where people get a little bit intimidated. And I just want to show you how easy it is. So I said, let me look up, let's come up with a good example of, on the left-hand side, we have our state departments of assessments and taxation. Again, we're in Maryland, so this is what you'll see. A lot of states have something very similar, but again, it might be under a different department in your state. So if you look, I looked up Retired Racehorse Project on the Maryland Department of Taxation and Assessment. And I can see here that Kirsten is the registered agent, which means that if there are any legal documents that need to be sent to Retired Racehorse Project, they're going to come to Kirsten. That's all a resident agent is. I have my own company. I'm my own registered agent. Okay. You can pay a registered agent company $100 or $200 a year to be your official registered agent. It's absolutely not necessary. You can have it be one of your board members, or it can be yourself as well. And I can see that they are incorporated and the business is in good standing. So great job, Kirsten and Retired Racehorse Project. You all are good to go. So then what I did is I went to the IRS website and I said, okay, well, let's check out their tax exempt status, right? Let's see. So I typed in Retired Racehorse Project. And you can see down here, kind of at the bottom of that round box, there they are, Retired Racehorse Project Limited. I can see that they have a Form 990 that they filed. They have an IRS letter of determination. They have all of their tax returns on the IRS website. So it's just that easy. Once you're able to access just the websites and the links, you'll see and become a little bit more comfortable with kind of this search tool. So after we do that, we've incorporated as a nonprofit in our state. It usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon your state, depending upon the volume of applications they have. It usually doesn't take a super long time, but it can vary. But the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to draft our bylaws. So these are our internal rules. These are our governance, our rules. And we're going to also establish those key policies. The first thing you have to do, remember we were talking about how important those founding board members are? You have to hold that first meeting before you file with the IRS, right? So, okay, now we're a corporation. We are incorporated in our state. So we're a business. We're a business in our state. We don't have tax exempt status yet because we have not voted on these items. We haven't had that board meeting and these things have not been formalized. We need to have our first board meeting. Your first board meeting can be 15 minutes long. It can be remote or it can be in person. But this is where you're going to want to have that initial conversation with your founding board members to sort of lay the groundwork and vote on them being instated as a board member, and also vote on your bylaws and any other pertinent information. Next thing we're going to do is the actual easiest thing that the IRS does, and it happens instantly, and things I never thought I would say about the IRS, is that you're going to get an EIN. It's an employee identification number, okay? This acts as your nonprofit's tax identification number. This is going to be something that I'm sure Kirsten and others, if you're in a nonprofit, you have yours memorized, because anytime you apply for a grant application or any sort of funding, you have to provide your tax identification number because they want to make sure that you're a tax exempt entity. And the next thing you're going to do is file for tax exempt status. This is what we're all here for, right? So there are two different, well, there's one way we can do this, but there's two different forms that we can do. So you have all this information already. You're incorporated in your state. You have your founding board members. You have your bylaws and your articles of incorporation. Now we need to file an IRS Form 1023. Form 1023, the full version, is for very, very large, complex organizations. The vast, vast majority of new nonprofits are going to be able to file the 1023-EZ. And the difference, my friends, between the 1023 and the 1023-EZ is about 30 pages and 12 weeks. So filing the 1023-EZ is a 4-page document. What it means is that you anticipate bringing in less than $50,000 in annual revenue for your first 3 years. Now, I have a lot of folks ask me, and I participate, I help a lot of clients go through this process, and they say, well, what happens if we go gangbusters and we make $100,000 in our 3rd year? Is the IRS going to make us file a full 1023? The answer is no. So again, it is only if you anticipate generating less than $50,000 in annual revenue for the first 3 years. So that's it. A 1023-EZ takes about 2 to 4 weeks to get back, sometimes less. And a 1023 takes significantly longer. It's about 12 to 16 weeks. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. Kirsten is monitoring them for us, okay? 7, 8, and 9, we're going to do it all in one fell swoop here. You may have to apply for state tax exemptions. So again, you're tax exempt on the federal level when you are with tax exempt with the IRS, but you have to see what your state's laws are around that, okay? You're going to register for charitable solicitation. So many states do require, and Maryland is also one of them. Before you solicit donations from people, you have to register as a charitable solicitor. There's a minimal cost. Some states have no cost, but they just basically want to know who's asking our constituents in the state for money. And we want to make sure that you're a legitimate nonprofit organization. The last thing you got to do is make sure that you're on top of all that paperwork. It's not super difficult. Really, the only primary things that you must do as a nonprofit is file an annual report with your respective state on an annual basis. And you want to make sure that every year you file an IRS Form 990. So if any of your volunteers are part of nonprofit organizations, you may have seen a 990 before. There are different levels of 990. So a 990N or EZ, a postcard, are truncated versions of the 990. It depends on the amount of gross revenue that your organization is bringing in. The rules have changed a little bit, but I want to say organizations under 100,000 don't have to file anything beyond a postcard. It might have to file an EZ, but a full 990 is a longer process. A 990N or a 990 EZ can very easily be done by a volunteer accountant or treasurer. Certainly, if you have the bandwidth or the resources to hire an accountant to help you with that, or a tax preparer, by all means do so. But I have to say the IRS does a pretty good job of making it pretty easy for, small nonprofits with limited resources, especially all volunteer ones, to stay compliant without a huge reach or a huge time expenditure. And of course, you want to make sure that you keep those financial records up and that you also conduct board meetings on a regular basis with a regular cadence. That's going to be determined by your bylaws. So some organizations meet twice a year, some boards meet twice a year, some boards meet every month. You get to decide that for your organization, but be really thoughtful about figuring out what those bylaws and rules are. Don't just think about where you are today, think about where you endeavor to be. So yes, we might need to meet, once a month now, but are we going to want to meet once a month when, we're 5 or 6 years down the road and we have, 20 board members instead of 3 board members? Those are important things to consider as you're crafting that sort of initial set of bylaws. So let's talk about our board a little bit more. Let's talk about building that strong foundation, okay? A board is a 3-legged stool with a nice comfy seat. And again, a board is a governing body for a nonprofit. They are tasked with ensuring that your organization is legally and ethically compliant. Okay. They're also tasked with making sure that the organization is financially healthy and that they provide that financial oversight. Basically, what that means is a member of a board, of a nonprofit board, is a fiduciary. They have fiduciary responsibility to the organization. What does that mean? It means 3 things. A fiduciary responsibility includes a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. So all of the paperwork and documents, conflict of interest policies, gift acceptance policies, all of the policies that you may want to include in your sort of founding documents, all of them touch one or more of these 3 things: duty of care, loyalty, or obedience. And, I always encourage folks, when you're looking at bringing in a founding board member, be judicious about who you're bringing in. A lot of us get really excited and we're like, I want to start this nonprofit. We've got to go. There's a problem that needs to be solved. The need is there. The horses need us. And I say to all of that, yes. And I think that's fantastic. And also, be sure you're picking the right people to join your board, especially your founding board, because they too have a responsibility, a legal responsibility to the organization. So I always really like to underscore that. So let's talk about those policies and procedures. There are about 1 million out there that you could employ, but here are the only ones that I want you to employ right away. Okay. Your articles of incorporation, you already have that. It's that legal document that you filed with your state, and your state will have a template for you of your articles of incorporation, or if you want an example, there are plenty of examples online. Same thing with bylaws. So you need bylaws before you can even become a tax exempt organization. Conflict of interest policy, we brought this up a couple of times. So again, we want to make sure that board members are acting in the best interest of this organization and that they're not financially benefiting from this organization in a substantial way. We also want to memorialize what are the roles of the board, what's their job versus what's everybody else's job. Do we have paid staff yet? Do we not? Do we aspire to have that? It's just really important that everybody has clarity around what their roles are. And then the financial policies, budgeting and accounting procedures. This is where the nonprofit as a business element really comes into play. Think about if you were running a business, you want to make sure that your books are balanced, right? You want to make sure that you're managing your money well. Same thing applies to a nonprofit. And then some other different types of policies, gift acceptance and whistleblower policies. These are important things to consider. You don't have to institute all of these all at once. I know that it seems like it's really overwhelming, but this is just more of a, what are the overall things that our organization is going to need in order to be healthy financially and structurally long-term. So let's talk briefly about mission, vision, and values. What's a mission statement? A mission statement is here's the word, succinct expression of your reason for existing. So why do we exist, right? Sometimes you can have a value statement in there as well, What a lot of organizations are now starting to do is they have a mission statement, which is what we do. A vision statement is what world do we envision that has to exist for us to say our work here is done and we close it up. So, if we're talking about the aftercare industry, our vision is a world where, every thoroughbred has a safe and loving home or has a job or anything like that. Okay. So that's our vision. It's an aspirational vision. Are we ever going to accomplish it? We may not. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a really close goal. It can be a super aspirational goal. There are some global hunger organizations where their vision is a world where no kid goes hungry at night, right? Is that ever going to happen? I sure hope so. The likelihood is low, but that is the vision that keeps them going. That is what sort of propels their mission and their programming forward to ultimately help achieve that vision. And then, not covered here, but you can incorporate sort of a value statement. What are our values? What are our belief statements, if that makes sense? But at a bare minimum, you want that sort of mission and vision. And again, the mission statement isn't just to say that we did it for the IRS. The mission statement is to figure out, who are we? What are we doing that's different than what other people in our area are doing? We really, really want to make sure with that 1.94 million nonprofits, we don't want to be in direct competition with our colleagues. We'll stop there. That's the end of section 2. And I'm sorry, I'm moving really fast through the content because we have so much to cover, and I also want to make sure we have plenty of time for the chat. I saw Hattie asked a great question. And I believe that was the minimum 1023 or easy question. And Kirsten did say that's gross revenue, which is exactly accurate. And Kirsten also pointed out a great fact, which is your state likely has a nonprofit association that has great templates for setting up these policies, which is absolutely right. And I have a couple of links as well that will help you. I have great central repositories for data templates. Okay. Nothing that we're talking about here is brand new. You will not be the first person to do it. I don't do anything brand new in my line of work. There's always a great resource or starting point online. The important thing is making it your own. Okay. All right. Now that the chat works, here's a quiz question. In 2023, how much was given to U.S. charities? And the answer is not Dr. Evil, $1 billion. Anyone want to take a guess? I hope you're surprised. We're going to move forward on it. 2.3 billion. Thank you, Hattie. How about 557 billion? How about that? That is how much was given to U.S. charities in 2023. I lead with this slide on almost every presentation or thing that I facilitate. And why do I do that? I do it because I think a lot of folks in the nonprofit world are worried that resources are scarce. And I think that's very accurate, or it's very valid to feel that way, that resources are scarce, maybe in your particular community, in your particular industry. But in the grand scheme of things, there is so much opportunity out there, and there's so many people that want to do good and help you do good too. And I really like to provide this breakdown because a lot of folks think, oh gosh, $557 billion, it must all be coming from Walmart or, Oprah or whatever, or some big corporation. And to that I say, no, it's coming from individuals. 2/3 of charitable giving in the United States comes from people just like you and me. So just remember that. It's your neighbors, it's your community that want to support you the greatest. Just under 20% are giving by foundation. So that's a private foundation, could be a corporate foundation. It really just depends on how they decide to give their charitable giving away. 8% is giving by bequest. So when people pass away, they leave in their will or trust an organization as a beneficiary. So you can see that that's numbers about $42 billion. We anticipate that number is going to go up quite significantly, actually, as silent generation and baby boomers begin to pass. They're going to transfer quite a bit of wealth to their heirs and are also quite philanthropic and will be leaving additional charitable bequests to organizations. And the smallest percentage is corporations, y'all. This number just blows my mind constantly, that 2/3 of charitable giving comes from individuals. And let's look at that 1.9 million nonprofits. What does their annual revenue look like? So before you think, gosh, I really shouldn't start it because I'm just going to be a small, small organization. You're a really important small organization, as are over 1 million nonprofits just like you across the country. You can see that 1 million nonprofits have a gross annual revenue of under $50,000 a year. And only 45,000 of 1.9 million nonprofits have revenues of over $5 million per year. Okay. And then the foundations, you can also see what their asset ranges are. So there are not that many huge monster foundations. There are foundations that are, ranging between 250 and $1 million. It's quite a significant amount of folks. So don't think that you're too small to make a difference. How does funding flow to organizations, to charities? I put this slide in, first of all, because it's great new data from candid.org, which is a fantastic resource. But I also put it in here because there's the thing happening right now that is a federal funding freeze with the administration. And a lot of folks are really nervous about that. And they're worried that there might be a significant impact on nonprofits. And I can't say I disagree, but I really want to point out to you that, again, look at that $499 billion and actually this is from 2022. That number is now 557 billion, as we talked about. But in 2022, it was 499 billion. And you can see that that's, $200 million more than the government gave to nonprofits in 2022. Okay, so don't despair because there's a potential federal funding freeze, but rather rejoice in the fact that the people who keep nonprofits afloat are going to continue to give at high levels, and those are people just like you and me. So let's talk about the types of funding, right? So, okay, I've started my nonprofit, I'm tax exempt, this is fantastic, I have these great bylaws, I have a great board. Now what? Now I need to find some funding. Or maybe you're already an established nonprofit and you're like, okay, well, how can I find some additional sources of funding? The reason I have sources in quotes is because I encourage you to not treat people like a source, okay? Relationships are the key of everything that we do. But for this conversation, these are different sources, okay? So you've got individual donors. You have different types of foundations, okay? We have different levels of individual donors as well, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Corporate supporters, okay? But let's remember, only 7 to 8% of charitable giving came from corporate support. You have bequests and planned gifts, which is estate giving that we just discussed. And you have government grants. Now, government grants can be federal, they can be state, or they can be local. I think it's important to point out that some state grants do come from federal sources, and some state grants come from strictly state sources. So if there is a federal funding freeze or reduction in federal government grants, that may trickle down to the state level. And then special events. So don't treat people like the Monopoly man. Don't be that person. I think we all have these people in our lives where you see their name pop up on your phone and you just don't want to answer the phone because you know they want something from you. That is not the experience that we want to establish and create for our donors and our supporters. So just in the interest of time, and honestly, just in the interest of where does most of the money flow into nonprofits, today we're going to talk about individual donors and grants and foundations. Okay, grants that come from foundations, rather. So how do we find our first donors? The first thing that we want to think about is, do they meet our criteria for the 3 A's? First of all, do they have the ability to give? Do they have an affinity to the work? Do they care about what we're doing? And do we have access to them, right? There's really no point in talking about Jeff Bezos if we don't have access to Jeff Bezos. We certainly know he has the ability to give. Do we know if he has an affinity to the aftercare industry? Unclear. But let's say even he did. If we don't have access to him, then he's probably not a good donor prospect, right? What are some good indicators? So when we're looking for folks, what are we looking at? Who are we looking for? And Kirsten and I were sort of joking before we opened up this webinar and hopped on the call that, when we're looking at IRS 990s to see what other organizations are doing, that's what we do on a Friday night for fun. And it's actually true because we're fundraising nerds. But it is really a wealth of information. The internet is an amazing place. So look at those national organizations, figure out who those donors are or who those foundations are. Look at the community foundation in your area and see the donors that are listed there, see the programs that they support. That's doing that research and that due diligence is the best way to find great prospects. And something that I also want to add is your best first donors are going to be board members or volunteers. Now, board members are volunteers, but if you have programmatic volunteers, they are going to be your best advocates and your best supporters, okay? Here are just a few ways to engage with those first donors. Social media, emails and newsletters. The higher sort of level donor, the higher opportunity that's there, you might want a little bit of a higher touch with them, maybe some phone calls or some one-on-one meetings. Opportunities to volunteer are always a fantastic way to bring people into an organization and teach them more. See if you are aligned with their interests. You know, the most important thing that we want to do as nonprofit professionals is to make sure that we're finding donors whose interests align with our mission. That's really all we're doing. It's okay if you find people who really like what you do, but it doesn't light their soul on fire. Not every organization is going to light everyone's soul on fire. That's why there's 1.9 million of them, because there is something that lights someone's soul on fire. It's just a matter of finding that right person for you. Some specific ways to engage with donors at certain levels. So you can kind of see that we are having a lighter touch, maybe something that could be more broadly applied to your maybe lower level donors. So how much time are you going to spend with, you know, somebody that, you know, might be able to give you $25 or $50? Not to say that they're not incredibly important and valuable donors and supporters, but you want to be spending a little bit more time with the folks that maybe have the capacity to make mid-level or major gifts. So if you think about it, you know, you have sort of your annual donors sort of at the lower level of a gift pyramid, right? And then you have people who are at the tip of the pyramid who make larger gifts, but there's a lot fewer of them. You want your time expenditure to be inverse of that. So you want to go where the juice is worth the squeeze, if that makes sense. And again, I reiterate that relationships are key because every single donor to an organization is important. They could be giving to absolutely anything, and they're giving to you because they believe in the work that you're doing. However, I also have to be pragmatic and realistic about the fact that nonprofits are resource constrained. Time is the most valuable thing that we have. And we never have enough of it, especially at the nonprofit level, especially if you're just considering starting a nonprofit and you're a volunteer. So that's why we want to sort of really prioritize the folks that have the ability to maybe make a larger gift. Or if we want to paint with a broader brush, we want to spend less time building out that content. So social media post or an email can go out to a bunch of people. That's fantastic. But if we really want to customize the conversations that we're having and have a higher touch, we want to make sure that we're spending that time with the people who have the ability to really help move the needle for us in that way. So let's talk about grants really quickly, because I know a lot of folks are really interested in grants, okay? And we're only going to talk today about sort of stages 1 through 3 of the grants life cycle, okay? Again, Google is going to be your best friend. There are lots of incredible grant prospecting resources online. Candid is one of them. And again, lots of these are linked. So it helps you find alignment. That's all we're ultimately looking for. We're looking for alignment, okay? You want to make sure that your mission is aligned with the funder's mission. So I'm probably not going to want to, you know, if I'm in the aftercare industry, I don't know that I want to reach out to, I don't know, a dog rescue, right? Or a foundation that only supports dog rescues. There's probably not going to be alignment there, okay? So you're looking for as close alignment as you can. And that doesn't have to be equestrian specific. It can be education, or it can be youth outreach, or it can be, think about the programs that you offer. Community building or health, anything like that. 990s are your best friend. Those are the tax forms that every organization, including private foundations, which are grant makers, are required to file. A lot of times funders have requirements. So check those out before you spend a great deal of time applying for grants. So if you have a funder that requires that you've been in operation for 3 years, but you're only 1 year, make sure that you're looking at those requirements beforehand so you don't do all that work and get to the end of the application and realize that you're not eligible for another 2 years. And then minimum or maximum operating budget is the same thing. And then also, what's our geographic proximity to them? You're going to have a much higher likelihood of securing a local or state grant than you will a national grant. That doesn't have anything to do with the value of your program. It's just a numbers game. A national grant that's open to everybody in the country is going to be more competitive than a local grant that's only open to those in your community. So this really applies to individual donors and grants and social media and everything. And again, this is why I said, let's think about that mission. Let's really, really think about that mission and that vision. How do we tell the story? Okay. You want to create a case for support. And a case for support tells the story of why you exist, what makes you different, and what you aspire to do in the future. These are the 4 things. Okay. What impact do you make? Why do you exist? What makes you different? And what do you want to do in the future? This looks like half a page to 1 page. It can be a little bit longer, but it really doesn't have to be. As long as you have these elements here, you are well on your way to creating your first marketing materials that, again, can be integrated through email, social media, individual conversations. This is something that can and should be shared with your board. Your board can even help inform what this looks like as a founding board member. And this is a great foundational document to sort of say, look, this is who we are and this is what we're trying to accomplish. Another way to think about it is a statement of need. These are 2 distinct documents. So you can either have a case for support or a statement of need, or you can have both. But if you had to pick or choose, I wanted you to sort of see what both of them were. So a statement of need is basically saying, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Whose problem is it? Why is it a problem? What happens if the problem is not addressed? And how do I know this? Okay. So this is a little more data heavy. A statement of need is really research based. So you're going to use resources like other case studies or surveys. I am positive that Retired Racehorse Project has some great data points or resources on the industry. So, if you're looking to do a programmatic extension of something related to, the aftercare industry, that might be a great place to start. Start with that sort of national scope, and then work your way down, right? Here's the national problem. Here's the overall problem. And here's how our organization in Tennessee or Maryland or California or wherever you may be is trying to solve it. So, and again, I have sources down here. All the tools that you're going to need are linked. Okay. Overall, what are the common themes that we want to accomplish in our messaging? And I love things that are all the same letter. Okay. We want to make sure we have clarity. What is our messaging? What are we asking for? What do we need? Okay. So if you say our organization helps, rehome, horses that are out of the thoroughbred and, industry or racing industry. Okay. So what do you need? What do you need around that? What are you asking people to help you with? Okay. And that leads right into, is it compelling? What's your mission? What's your impact? What are your target outcomes? People give to people. People want to know those stories. So how do you really, shore up that storytelling? The third C is competence. Competence is what you do. Okay. And competency is how well you do it. So you want to make sure that you're putting together a really nice presentation of yourself, of your organization. That's something really important, especially for donors. And you really want to be consistent too. And again, this is why having those sort of foundational documents, a case for support, a needs statement, are so important, because they help you to create that consistency so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to talk about your organization. You already have those talking points and you already have those goals. And the bonus C is champions. Use your network. I think I saw something in the chat about, can board members be donors? They better be, and they should be your best donors and your best advocates. Your board members and your volunteers or your founding supporters are going to be some of the best champions you have. And you should absolutely utilize them and make them feel valued. And Have them reach out and talk to folks about why this work is so important to them. Get a one-liner so you can do a short testimonial about why they give. People give to people. So it's really nice to have that sort of diversity in communications. Any questions on this section? All right, we will move on. All right, how do we manage all of this? This is my favorite GIF, the confused math lady, right? So Lily's just giving me a ton of information. I've got a ton of policies to write. I've got bylaws. I have to come up with a case for support. I have to, come up with these different ways to engage with donors. What am I supposed to do with all this information, especially if I'm a volunteer or especially if I'm brand new and I don't have the revenue to be, buying tools and databases and all of this stuff? I have good news for you. There's only 3 things that you absolutely must have when you start. Can you use more? Sure. But the bare minimum, 3 things, okay? We want to have a donor or relationship management system, okay? Sometimes it's called a CRM, a constituent relationship management system. Sometimes it's called DMS, donor management system. It's a database, okay? That's what it is. What do we use it for? We use it to track our donors, track their gift history. You can also use it to track volunteers, program clients. It's a central repository for your stakeholders, okay? There are a lot of cost-effective options out there. Bloomerang, Little Green Light. There are lots of really nice database options. And there's an amazing resource called TechSoup, techsoup.org. It provides deep discounted technology to nonprofits as long as you have your 501c3 status. A lot of these resources you can find for very, very cost-effective amounts. But guess what? If you don't have that, or if you don't have the bandwidth or the resources, start with a shared spreadsheet. I can't tell you how many clients I have that we're still working on a shared spreadsheet or an Excel sheet. That's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you have everything in one place. Okay. And then if you want to eventually transition over to another database, that's fantastic. All of these new databases have the ability to upload an Excel file and they'll put that information into your database for you. So as long as you have a starting point, you're in good shape. So that's the first piece you need. What's the second thing we need? Well, we have all these amazing documents, right? We got to make sure that we put them somewhere. We need to put them somewhere that's safe and secure, can absolutely be cloud-based. There's Dropbox, there's SharePoint, there's Google Drive, there's a bunch of things. This is also really important, y'all, because if there's a transition in leadership or a volunteer shift, or if somebody, hits the lottery and decides that maybe they don't want to do this anymore, there will be turnover. And so we really want to create a central repository for the organization's assets. You don't want the assets to be tied to a person. You want them to be tied to the organization, and you want to make sure that multiple people have access to those things just in case something happens, okay? And that's the compliance element. Obviously, from the financial perspective, you want a bank account, an accounting system. QuickBooks is a great place to start. QuickBooks Online. You can get a desktop version as well. But you really want to make sure that you have a separate bank account where you're able to do the nonprofit's business. And then the third thing that you absolutely need is communications tools, okay? Fundraising tools. You don't necessarily need a website right away, but I'll tell you what, there are plenty of super cost-effective website builders nowadays. I would highly recommend you get one. At a bare minimum, get some social media going, right? Get your social media. And sometimes built into your website is your email marketing platform. So MailChimp or iContact or things like that. You want to be able to communicate with your volunteers and your donors and your program folks. So you have to make sure that you have your communications stuff in line. And then you also want to make sure that you make it easier for people to donate online, whether it's through PayPal or DonorBox or Zephy or Bloomerang, or there's about a million different ways. Make it really easy for people to give online. And again, this goes back to number 2. This is why you want to build, you want to have a bank account that's dedicated to the organization. I know a lot of folks that are founding organizations, they start with, their personal PayPal and things, and I totally get that. It's just a lot easier to keep those things entirely separate, just from a compliance perspective, both at the state and the IRS level. And then finally, I know we've policied ourselves to death here, but if this is sort of the next level, consider as you get further along in your organization's trajectory, consider instituting some additional operational policies. So, what's our document retention policy? Do we have policies around our volunteers? I volunteer for many organizations, and some of them work with youth or sensitive populations. We want to make sure that we have a policy that we want to make sure that everybody's getting a background check and that we set the expectations for those folks as well. And then crisis management and emergency procedures. These are all things that we don't think we're going to need until we need them. And when we need them yesterday. And I don't want you to get into that situation. I want you to be proactive and think about these things and have them ready to deploy when something happens. And usually that means that it won't happen because you've thought ahead and you've prepared it. It's just like getting travel insurance for a vacation. Nothing ever happens if you have travel insurance, but if you don't have travel insurance, something always happens, right? So this is just a short list of additional policies that you can institute. It's really going to depend on your type of organization, the type of work that you're doing. But I would say, within a year or two of founding your organization, I would highly encourage you to have all of these in your shared repository, and make sure that you're revisiting your policies on an annual basis, making sure they're still applicable, making sure they're refreshed, and updating them accordingly. So that's kind of it. I really tried to blaze through it so that we can have plenty of time for questions. I do know that folks are asking questions sort of on the side. Airtable, that's a great resource. Learning.candid.org. I've talked about Candid quite a bit tonight. I can't say enough about Candid. Candid actually used to be the Foundation Center and GuideStar and one other entity, and merged to become candid.org. And they have just an extraordinary amount of resources, trainings, a knowledge base, lots of sample documents, and it's absolutely free. Candid.org itself, to access certain parts of it, is a paid subscription, but learning.candid.org is 100% free, and I highly encourage you to utilize that it's a great starting point. And you'll find that it sort of takes you to other places as well. Any questions?
Everybody's brains are full. Hard drives are tapped
I get
out.
it.
A lot to take in, but it's been
I get it. It is a lot to take in. But I'll tell you what, it is, and there's no easy way to sort of cram all of this information into 1 hour. But what I will tell you is, look at this, just check out the PowerPoint, as it's much easier to sort of go through at your own pace. And it really is a bulleted list. So just go down the list. I promise you, it seems like it's a lot, and it is a lot. It really is a lot. But once you start moving through it, you'll find that it's maybe not as challenging as you once thought. Don't be intimidated by it. I want everybody's key takeaway here to be, everybody is doing fantastic work. Really think about, if you want to start a nonprofit organization, you got to think about, is someone else already doing this work? That's something that's really, really important to consider. I don't want to detract you from doing it, but just know that, it's a lift. It's a lift for sure. So make sure that you're not duplicating efforts. So, is full-time job, or do I manage it on the side? Hattie, is that question for me? I think maybe yes.
I think so.
Yes. So I actually am not a nonprofit organization. I'm a philanthropic consultant. Though I've been on the nonprofit side, and I worked in nonprofit for about 12 years before I founded my own company 3 years ago. And I figured, I was like, I really like helping nonprofits, but when I worked at nonprofits, I was only helping one at a time, the one that I was employed at. And I said, I think I kind of want to help many nonprofits. And that's why I started my own business. So I've been on the other side of things. And I do help folks get their compliance and things started on a pretty regular basis. So I do that full time. But I will say I started it as a side gig, and it quickly became my full-time gig because there's a lot of need out there and a lot of money to be raised for great, great causes. And then Lauren asked, what kind of services do I offer? Thanks for the question, Lauren. A little bit of everything. Nonprofits are complex. And, originally my background is in fundraising and development, but it's never just about fundraising and development. It's always about operations and, programs, those things they go hand in hand. Budgeting, governance, all of these things. So I have clients that I'm engaged with for, a capital campaign, which is a special fundraising effort around a bricks and mortar project. I've got some clients that are just on a retainer where I help them raise money for, on an ongoing basis, help them with their annual giving and, grant applications and things like that. And then I do a lot of facilitations just like this one, where I work with, actually Kirsten and I met because I facilitated a cohort through a community foundation here in Maryland and through a nonprofit center. And there were 24 organizations that were part of it, and Retired Racehorse Project was one of those amazing organizations. So I do a little bit of everything. No day is quite the same. Thanks for the question. I know it's a lot of information. You have my email, you have the slides. Please feel free to reach out to me. It doesn't have to be today or tomorrow. If you think about it and you decide maybe this is a road that you'd like to go down, I'm always available. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to talk you through anything that may not have been clear, or if there are any additional resources that you're looking for. Ask me first, because chances are I've got 5 or 6 versions of it, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. Okay. So thank you to everybody for joining us. Let's talk about IRS compliance. It's not for the faint of
Really
heart.
impressed. We had like a very ambitious agenda to fill, and you like just bang on, like got through it all. So
we did it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for the feedback in the chat. And again, super excited to see all the amazing work that you will do. Just on a personal level or a personal note, this work is just so critically important. And I'm a big animal person myself. Obviously, I started my business. My black dog is a real black dog. And, I think that we're generally empathetic people. So I cannot thank you enough for everybody, who joined this call for your passions and for caring enough to take the time to learn more about this. So, the nonprofit world is in some ways under attack right now. And I have to say that it's challenging to see, but at the same time, I think it really underscores how important the work is. So thank you to everybody for either being part of a nonprofit, for considering joining one, but really just for caring about people and animals and things. It's kind of lost out there some days. So it's very inspiring to see everybody on this call.
Yes, Hattie, you're also welcome to email me. Anybody on this call, my email is kgreen@therrp.org. So thank you everybody for coming out. We have one last session left in Aftercare Industry Month. That's going to be next Thursday evening, same time, same place. And we're going to be talking about securing a facility of long-term for your program. So that will be with Kristen Bentley, and I will have this recording and Lily's email and another link to the slide deck distributed either tomorrow or Monday. So anything else we can help you with, don't be hesitating to drop us a line. So
cool.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Kirsten, I want to come to that last session. That sounds like a good one.
What's that?
I want to come to that last session. That sounds like a really good one.
Yeah, there's been a couple of nonprofit organizations in the last year or two that have, like, with just kind of the environment, the way things are, people have like lost leases on their facilities, like with very little notice, and have had to do big capital campaigns and stuff like that to secure a long-term facility. So we've got people that have on the for and nonprofit side that have been through that, in varying scales. So it'll be, plus our pro bono attorney will be on to kind of talk through the legal stuff too. So
very nice.
Good one.
I'm going to join in on that one for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Have a great
evening. Everyone. Have a great night.
Take care.
Bye.